This is Audible.
Beg, Tease, Submit. Sequence 1, the Submission Series. Written by C.D. Reiss. Narrated by Joe Raylan. Beg. 1. At the height of singing the last note, when my lungs were still full, and I was switching from pure physical power to emotional thrust, I was blindsided by last night's dream. Like most dreams, it hadn't had a story. I was on top of a grand piano on the rooftop bar of Hotel K. The fact that the real hotel didn't have a piano on the roof notwithstanding, I was on it, and naked from the waist down, propped on my elbows. My knees were spread further apart than physically possible. Customers drank their $30 drinks and watched as I sang. The song didn't have words, but I knew them well, and as the strange man with his head between my legs licked me, I sang harder and harder, until I woke with an arched back and soaked sheets, hanging on to a middle C for dear life. Same as the last note of our song, and I held it like a stranger was pleasuring me on a non-existent piano. I drew that last note out for all it was worth, pulling from deep inside my diaphragm, feeling the song rattle the bones of my ribcage, sweat pouring down my face. It was my note. The dream told me so. Even after Harry stopped strumming and Gabby's keyboard softened to silence, I croaked out the last tearful strain as if gripping the edge of a precipice. When I opened my eyes in the dark club, I knew I had them. Every one of them stared at me as if I had just ripped out their souls, put them in envelopes, and sent them back to their mothers, COD. Even in the few silent seconds after I stopped, when most singers would worry that they'd lost the audience, I knew I hadn't. They just needed permission to applaud. When I smiled, permission was granted, and they clapped all right. Our band, Spoken Not Stirred, had brought down the Thelonious Room. A year of writing and rehearsing songs and a month of getting bodies in the door had paid off right here, right now. The crowd, that was what it was all about. That was why I busted my ass. That was why I had shut out everything in my life but putting a roof over my head and food in my mouth. I didn't want anything from them but that ovation. I bowed and went off stage, followed by the band. Harry bolted to the bathroom to throw up, as always. I could still hear the applause and banging feet. The room held 100 people, and the audience sounded like 1,000. I wanted to take the moment to bathe in something other than the disappointment and failure that accompanied a career in music, but I heard Gabrielle next to me, tapping her right thumb and middle finger. Her gaze was blank, settled in a corner, her eyes as big as teacups. I followed that gaze to exactly nothing. The corner was empty, but she stared as if a mirror into herself stood there, and she didn't like what she saw. I glanced at Darren, our drummer. He stared back at me, then at his sister, who had tapped those fingers since puberty. "Gabby," I said. She didn't answer. Darren poked her bicep. "Gabs, shit together?" "Fuck off, Darren," Gabby said flatly, not looking away from the empty corner. Darren and I looked at each other. We were each other's first loves, back in LA Performing Arts High, and even after the soft, simple breakup, we had deepened our friendship to the point we didn't need to talk with words. We said to each other with our expressions that Gabby was in trouble again. "We rule!" Harry gave a fist pump as he exited the bathroom, still buttoning up his pants. "You were awesome." He punched me in the arm, oblivious to what was going on with Gabby. "My heart broke a little, it split me." "Thanks," I said without emotion. I did feel gratitude, but we had other concerns at the moment. "Where's Vinny?" Our manager, Vinny Mardigian, appeared as if summoned, all glad-handing and smiles. Such a dick. I really couldn't stand him, but he'd seemed confident and competent when we met. "You happy?" I said. "We sold all our tickets at full price. Now, maybe next time we won't have to pay to play?" "Hello, Monica sexy bitch." That was his pet name for me. The guy had the personality of a landfill and the drive of a shark in bloody waters. Nice to see you, too. I got performers agency on the line. The guy's right outside. Great. I needed representation from the rinky-dink agency like I needed a hole in the head. But I was an artist, and I was supposed to take whatever the industry handed me with a smile and spread legs. Vinny, of course, couldn't shut up worth a damn. He was high on performers agency and the worldwide fame he thought they would get us. He didn't realize half a step forward was just as good as a full step back. You've got a crowd out there asking for an encore. Everybody here does their job, then everybody's happy. I listened, and sure enough, they were still clapping, and Gabby was still staring into the corner. 2. Darren took Gabby home after the encore, which she played like the crazy prodigy she was. Then she blanked out again. Her depression was ameliorated by music and brought on by just about anything, even if she was taking her meds. She'd attempted suicide 2 years before after a few weeks of corner staring and complaining of not being able to feel anything about anything. I'd been the one to find her in the kitchen, bleeding into the sink. That had been terrific for everyone. She took my second bedroom, and Darren moved from a roommate-infested guest house in West Hollywood to a studio a block away. We played music together because music was what we did, and because it kept Gabby sane, Darren close, and me from screwing up. But it didn't even keep us in hot dogs. We all worked, and until I got my current gig at the rooftop bar at Hotel K, I had to give up Starbucks because I couldn't rub 2 nickels together to make heat. Because Spoken Not Stirred had drawn more people than the cost of our guaranteed tickets, we'd made $300 that night. 15% went to Vinny Landfillian. $68 paid for Harry's parking ticket because he figured if he was loading his bass in AMP, he could park in a loading zone on the Sunset Strip before 6 o'clock. We split the rest 4 ways. Hotel K was a spanking new, modernist 30-story diamond in a 1-story stucco shitpile of a neighborhood. The rooftop bar thing in LA had gotten out of hand. You couldn't swing a dead talent agent without hitting some new construction with a barside pool on the roof and thumping music day and night. The upside of the epidemic was that waitress service was the norm, and tall, skinny girls who could slip between name-dropping drunks while holding heavy trays over their heads without clocking anyone were an absolute necessity. The downside for someone tall and skinny like myself was my replaceability. You couldn't swing a tall, skinny girl in L.A. without hitting another one. Darren and I had taken too long discussing who would watch Gabby. He convinced her to stay at his place for the night, though convinced might not be the word to use when talking about someone who didn't care about where she slept, or anything, one way or the other. I ran from the elevator to the hotel locker room, the $50 I'd made for holding 100 people in the palm of my hand, light in my pocket. I peeled off my jacket and stuffed it in my locker, then pulled my shirt off. I didn't have a second to spare before Yvonne, who I was relieving, started chewing me out for stranding her on the floor. I yanked a low-cut dress that showed more leg than modesty out of my bag and wrestled into it. "You're late," Freddie, my manager, said. He stank of cigarettes, which I found disgusting. "I'm sorry, I had a gig." I kicked off my shoes and pulled my pants off from under my dress. I had no time to worry about what Freddie thought of me. "Bully for you." Freddie crossed his arms, scrunching his brown pinstripe suit. He had a mole on his cheek and wore a puckered expression even when he looked down my shirt, which was almost every time we talked. I didn't wait to argue. I slipped back into my shoes, slapped my locker shut, and ran toward the floor. "Yvonne!" I caught her in the back hall as she folded a wad of tips into her pocket. "Monica, girl, where were you?" "I'm sorry. Thanks for covering my tables. Can I make it up to you?" "I don't get home in time. You can pay the sitter an extra hour." "No problem," I said, though it was a big problem. "Jonathan Drazen is at your table." She put her hand to her heart. "He's hot, and he'll tip if he likes what he sees, so be nice." She handed me the tickets for my station. Drazen was my boss's boss. He owned the hotel, but we'd never crossed paths. Apparently he traveled a lot, and he spent little or no time on the roof when he was in town, so we hadn't met. This development was more annoying than anything. I'd just gotten the ovation of my life at a really cool club and was bathing in the warm validation. I didn't need to prove myself all over again, and based on what? If it wasn't my music, I didn't care. The place was packed, wall-to-wall Eurotrash, Hollywood heavyweights, and assorted hangers-on.
The pool was a big rectangle in the center of the expanse. Red chairs surrounded it, and a large cocktail area with tables and chairs sat off to the side. Little tents with couches inside outlined most of the roof, and when the curtains closed, you left them closed, unless someone looked as though they'd taken off without paying. I stood at the service bar, flipping through my tickets. 5 tables, 2 with little star punch-outs in the upper right-hand corners. Put there by Freddie, they meant someone important was at the table. Extra care was required. My first tray was a star punch-out. I put on a smile and navigated through the crowd to deliver the tray to a table in the corner. 4 men, and I knew Drazen right away. He had red hair cut just below the ears, disheveled in that absolutely precise way. He wore jeans and a gray shirt that showed off his broad shoulders and hard biceps. His full lips stretched across flawless, natural teeth when he saw his tray coming, and I was caught a little off guard by how much I couldn't stop looking at him. "Hi," I stammered. "I'll be your server." I smiled. That always worked. Then I thought happy thoughts because that made my smile genuine, and I watched Drazen move his gaze from my smiling face over my breasts to my hips, stopping at my calves. I felt as if I were being applauded again. He looked back at my face. I stared right back at him, and he pursed his lips. I'd caught him looking, and he seemed justifiably embarrassed.
"Hello,"
he said.
"You're new."
His voice resonated like a cello, even over the music. I checked Yvonne's notes and picked up a short glass with ice and amber liquid from the tray. "You have the Jamesons?"
"Thank you."
He nodded to me, keeping his eyes on my face and off my body. Even then, I felt as if I were being eaten alive, sucked to fluid, mouthful by mouthful. A liquid feeling came over me, and I stopped doing my job for half a second while I allowed myself to be completely saturated by that warm feeling. In that moment, of course, someone, a man judging from the weight of impact, pushed or got pushed, and my tray went flying. For a second, the glasses hung in the air like a handful of glitter, and I thought I could catch them. I felt the sound of the impact too long after 3 gin and tonics splashed over each guest. I was shocked into silence as everyone at the table stood, hands out, dripping, clothes getting darker at crotches and chests. A collective gasp rose from everyone within splash distance. Freddie appeared like a zombie smelling fresh brains.
"You're fired."
He turned to Drazen and said,
"Sir, can I get you anything? We have shirts."
Drazen shook a splash of liquid off his hand.
"It's fine."
"I am so sorry," I said. Freddie got between me and my former boss, as if I would beg him for my job back, which I'd never do, and said,
"Get your things."
3. Fuck it. Fuck that job and everything else. I'd get another one. I promised myself I was going to make it big, and when I did, I would come in here with my freaking entourage, and Freddie was going to serve me whatever I wanted for no tip at all, not even a cent. And Jonathan Drazen was going to sit by me and look at me just like he did before I spilled gin and tonic all over him, but like I'm an equal, not like some little piece of candy working for tips. I slammed my locker shut. I had to find another job soon. I always paid my housing expenses first, but we owed the studio money, and I couldn't take another dime from Harry. Freddie strode down the dim hallway, toes pointed out and walking like a duck on a mission. "Fuck off, Freddie, I'm leaving, and by the way, you're in—"
"Mr. Drazen wants to see you."
"Fuck him. He can't summon me. I don't work for him anymore."
Freddie smiled like a sly cat.
"Sometimes he gives the short-timers a severance if he feels bad. Nice chunk of change. After that, you can get the hell out if you don't want to sleep with him. I'd like to see him not get laid for once."
He took a step closer. I didn't know why he'd get close enough to touch me, so I didn't back away. And when he slapped my ass, I was so stunned I didn't move. He ended the slap with a pinch. "What did you—" But he was already waddling off, elbows bent, as if someone else's life needed to be miserable, and he was just the guy to make it so. I stood there with my mouth open, 70% mad at him for being a complete molester, and 30% mad at myself for being too shocked to punch him in the face. 4. I had pride. I had so much pride that healing at Jonathan Drazen's beck and call for a chunk of change was the most humiliating thing I could think of doing. But there I was, in front of his ajar door on the 30th floor, knocking. Not because I needed the money, which I did, and not because I wanted him to look at me like that again, which I also did, but because I couldn't have been the first waitress ass-slapped, or worse, by Freddie. If Drazen wasn't aware of Freddie's douchebaggery, he needed to be. The office looked onto the Hollywood Hills, which must have been stunning in daylight. At night, the neighborhood was just a splash of twinkling lights on a black canvas. He stood behind his desk, back to the window, the room's soft lighting a flattering glaze on the perfect skin of his forearms. He wore a fresh pair of jeans and a white shirt. The dark wood and frosted glass accentuated the fact his office was meant to be a comforting space, and even though I knew the setting was manipulating me, I relaxed.
"Come on in,"
he said. I stepped onto the carpet, its softness easing the pain caused by my high heels. "I'm sorry I spilled on you. I'll pay for dry cleaning if you want."
"I don't want. Sit down."
His green eyes flickered in the lamplight. I had to admit, he was stunning. His copper hair curled at the edges, and his smile could light 1,000 cities. He couldn't have been older than his early 30s. "I'll stand," I said. I was wearing a short skirt, and judging from the way he'd looked at me on the roof, if I sat down, I'd receive another stare that would make me want to jump him.
"I want to apologize for Freddie,"
he said.
"He's a little more aggressive than he should be."
"We need to talk about that," I said. He raised an eyebrow and came around to the front of the desk. He wore some cologne that stole the scent of sage leaves on a foggy day, dry, dusty, and clean. He leaned on his desk, putting his hands behind him, and I could see the whole length of his body. Broad shoulders, tight waist, and straight hips. He looked at me again, then down to the floor. I felt as if he'd moved his hands off of me, and at once I was thrilled and ashamed. I wasn't going to be intimidated or scared. I wasn't going to let him look away from me. If he wanted to stare, he should stare. I placed my hands on my hips and let my body language challenge him to put his eyes where they wanted to go, not the floor. Because fuck him. Freddie's a douchebag. I could tell from his expression that was the wrong way to start. I needed to keep opinions and juicy expressions to myself and state facts. "He said you're going to try to sleep with me, for one." He smiled as if he really was going to try to sleep with me and got caught. "Then," I continued, because I wanted to wipe that smile off his gorgeous face, "he grabbed my ass." The smile melted as though it was an ice cube in a hot frying pan. He took his hungry eyes off mine, a relief on one hand and a disappointment on the other.
"I was going to offer you severance."
"I don't want your money."
"Let me finish."
I nodded, a sting of prickly heat spreading across my cheeks.
"The severance was in case you didn't want to continue working here,"
he said.
"Even though I can't stand the smell of the gin you got on me, I don't think you should lose your job over it. But now that you told me that, what should I do? If I give you severance, it looks like I'm paying you off. And if I unfire you, it looks like I'm letting you stay because I'm afraid of getting sued."
"I get it," I said. "If you said you'd try to sleep with me, then you've got your own shit to hide, and nothing would bring it out better than a lawsuit." I waited a second to see if I could glean anything from his eyes, but he had his business face on, so I put on my sarcasm face. "Quite a terrible position you're in." His nod told me he understood me. His position was privileged. He got to make choices about my life based on his convenience.
"What do you do, Monica?"
"I'm a waitress." He smirked, looking at me full on, and I wanted to drop right there.
"That's your circumstance. It's not who you are. Law school, maybe?"
"Like hell."
"Teacher, woodworker, volleyball player?"
He ran the words together quickly, and I guessed he could come up with another 100 potential professions before he got it right. "I'm a musician," I said.
"I'd like to see you play sometime."
"I'm not going to sleep with you."
"Indeed."
He walked back behind his desk.
"I assume no one witnessed this alleged ass grab?"
"Correct." He opened a drawer and flipped through some files.
I hired Freddie, and he's my responsibility to manage. Your responsibility is to report it to someone besides me.
He handed me a slip of paper. It was a standard U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission flyer.
The numbers are on there. File a report. Send me a copy, please. It would protect both of us.
I stared at the paper. Drazen could get into a lot of trouble if enough reports were filed. I intended to tell the authorities what had happened because I couldn't stand Freddie. But I felt a little sheepish about getting Drazen cited or investigated.
You're not an asshole, I said.
He bowed his head, and though I couldn't see his face, I imagined he was smiling. He took a card from his pocket and came back around the desk.
My friend Sam owns the stock downtown. I think it's a better fit for you. I'll tell him you might call.
When I took the card, I had an urge I couldn't resist. I reached my hand a little farther than I should have and brushed my finger against his. A shot of pleasure drove through me, and his finger flicked to extend the touch. I had to get away from that guy as fast as possible.
5. Los Angeles weather in late September was mid-July weather everywhere else. Dog's mouth hot. Sweat through your antiperspirant hot. Car exhaust hot. Gabby seemed better than the previous night, but Darren and I were on our toes.
Gabby said she was going for a walk, and trying to make sure she wasn't alone, I suggested she and I get ice cream at the artisanal place on Sunset. We sat on the outside patio so the noise would mask our conversation. I poked at my strawberry basil ice cream while she considered her wasabi honey longer than she might have a week ago. "It's good money," she said, trying to talk me into a Thursday night lounge job. "And no pay to play, just cash and go home."
I hate those gigs. I hate being background.
$200? Come on, Monica. You don't have to learn any songs. One rehearsal, maybe two, and we got it. Gabby had spent her childhood getting her fingers slapped with a ruler every time she made a mistake on the piano. Her playing became so perfect she barely had to work at it. She was so compulsive, her every waking moment was spent eating, playing, or thinking about playing, so the word rehearse couldn't apply to her because it implied an artist taking time out of their day to get something right, not a compulsive perfectionist basically breathing. She was a genius, and in all likelihood, her genius plus her perfectionist nature drove her depression. "I only want to sing my own songs," I said. "You can spin them. Just come on. If I don't bring a voice on, I'll lose the gig, and I need it." That hitch in her voice meant she was swinging between desperation and emotional flatness, and it terrified me. "Mom, I can't wait for the next spoken gig. I'm 25, and I don't have a lot of time. We don't have a lot of time. Every month goes by, and I'm nobody. God, I don't even have an agent. What will happen to me? I can't take it. I think I'll die if I end up like Frida Dupree, trying her whole life, and then she's in her 60s and still going to band auditions."
You're not going to end up like Frida Dupree.
"I have to keep working. Every night that goes by without someone seeing me play is a lost opportunity. Performance school rote bullshit. Get out and play. Keep working. Play the odds." Teachers told poor kids they might be seen if they busted their violins on the streets if they had to. Dream feeders. Fuck them. Some of those kids should have gone into accounting, and that line of shit kept them dreaming a few too many years. I looked at Gabby, with her big blue eyes pleading for consideration. She was mid-anxiety attack. If it continued over the coming weeks, the anxiety attacks would become less frequent and the dead stares into corners more frequent if she didn't take her meds regularly. Then it would be trouble. Another suicide attempt, or worse, a success. I loved Gabby. She was like a sister to me, but sometimes I wished for a less burdensome friend. "Fine," I said. "One time, okay? You can find someone else in all of Los Angeles to do it next time." Gabby nodded and tapped her thumb and middle finger together. "It's good," she said. "It'll be good, Monica. You'll knock them out, you will." The words had a rote quality, like she said them just to fill space.
"I guess I need it too," I said. "I got fired last night."
"What did you do?"
"Spilled drinks in my boss's lap."
That Freddie guy?
Jonathan Drayson.
Oh. She put her hands to her mouth. He also owns the ROQ Club in Santa Monica, so don't try to work there either.
Did she know he's gorgeous?
A voice came from behind me. Talking about me again? Darren had shown up. God bless him. Jonathan Drayson fired her last night, Gabby said.
Who is that?
He sat down, placing his laptop on the table. He didn't do it. Freddie did. Drayson just offered me a severance and referred me to the stock. And apparently he's gorgeous. He raised an eyebrow at me. I shrugged. Darren and I were over each other, but he'd rib me bloody at the slightest sign of weakness.
Haven't heard you talk like that about a guy in a year and a half. I thought maybe you were still in love with me.
I must have blushed, or my eyes might have given away some hidden spark of feeling, because Darren snapped open his laptop.
Let's see what kind of Wi-Fi I can pick up.
I don't talk like that about men because I prefer celibacy to bullshit. Darren tapped away on his laptop.
Jonathan Drayson, 32, old man.
He looked at me over the screen. Do not underestimate how hot he is. I could barely talk.
Earned his money the old-fashioned way.
Rich daddy?
A long line of them. It makes more in interest than the entire GDP of Burma.
Darren scrolled through some web page or another. He loved the internet like most people love puppies and babies.
Real estate magnate, Howard Jonathan III.
He drifted off as he scrolled.
BA from Penn, MBA from Stanford. He brought the business back. Bazillionaire. He's a real catch if you can tear him away from the 400 other women he's getting photographed with.
La la la, don't care.
Why? It's not like you've had sex in what?
Darren clicked around, pretending he didn't care about my answer, but I knew he did. Men are bad news, I said. They're a distraction. They make demands.
Not all men are Kevin.
Kevin was my last boyfriend, the one whose control issues had turned me off to men for 18 months.
La la la, not talking about Kevin either.
I scraped the bottom of my ice cream cup. Darren turned his laptop so I could see the screen.
This him?
Jonathan Drayson stood between a woman and a man I didn't recognize. I scrolled through the gossip page. His Irish good looks were undeniable next to anyone, even movie stars. He has been photographed with an awful lot of women, I said.
Yeah, he's been a total fuck around since his divorce, FYI. If you wanted him, he'd probably be game. All I'm saying.
He crossed his legs and looked out onto sunset. Gabby had a faraway look as she watched the cars. His wife was Jessica Carnes, Gabby recited, as if she was reading a newspaper in her head. The artist? Drayson married her at her father's place in Venice Beach. She's half-sister to Thomas Deacon, the sports agent at APR, who has a baby with Susan Kincaid, the hostess at the Key Club, whose brother plays basketball with Eugene Testarossa, our dream agent at WDE.
One day, Gabster, your obsession with Hollywood interrelationships will pay off.
Darren clicked his laptop closed.
But not today.
6. I think one could be at Hotel K, get blindfolded, taken to the stock, and believe they'd been driven around and dropped in the same place they started. Same pool, same chairs, same couches, same music, and the same assholes clutching the same drinks and passing off the same tips. What was different was that there was no Freddie. The stock had Debbie, a tall Asian lady who wore mandarin collar-embroidered shirts and black trousers. She knew every superstar from just their face, and they loved her as much as she loved them. She could tell a movie mogul from an actress and sat them where they'd have the most professional friction. She coordinated the waitresses' tables according to the patron's taste and coddled the girls until they worked like a machine. She was the nicest person I'd ever worked for. "Smile, girl," Debbie said. I'd been there a week, and she knew exactly how many tables I could handle, how fast I was compared to the others, and my strong suit, which appeared to be my magnetic personality. "People look at you," she said. "They can't help it. Be smiling." It was hard to smile. We'd had 3 good shows in a row, then Vinny disappeared into thin air. We'd banged on his office door in Thai Town, went to his house in East Hollywood, and called 400 times. No Vinny. Every gig he had lined up for us fell through. My momentum was slowing, and I didn't like it.
"What's your freaking problem?"
said one dude as he threw a dollar bill and 3 dimes on my tray.
"You need a blast of Coke or something?"
He'd looked like every other spiky-haired, fake blonde Hugo Boss-wearing douche nozzle who'd name-dropped from 0 to 60 in 3 beers. But Debbie had put his name on the ticket, probably as a favor to me. His name was Eugene Testarossa, the one guy at WDE I'd wanted to meet for months. In my depression over stupid Vinny, I hadn't recognized him. I stalked toward the bathroom on my break and bumped into a hard chest that smelled of sage green and fog.
"Monica,"
Jonathan said.
"Hey, Sam told me he hired you."
His green eyes looked down at me, and I wanted to break apart under the weight of them.
As he looked at me, his face went from amused to concerned.
"Are you okay?"
"Fine, just a bad day. Whatever." I stepped toward the bathroom, but he seemed disinclined to let me go so easily.
"I got your report. Thank you. It was very professional."
You assumed a waitress couldn't put together a sentence?
His glance down told me I'd been a bitch. He didn't deserve my worst side. I tried to think fast. I didn't want a barrage of questions about my life right then. The Dodgers lost, and I'm from Echo Park and all, so I got a little down.
"The Dodgers won tonight."
His pressed lips and bemused eyes told me he understood I was half joking. I shuffled my feet, feeling like a kid caught lying about kissing behind the gym. Yeah, fucking Jesus Ronaldo, pulling it out in the 9th like that.
He's got 5 good pitches in him per game.
He tends to throw them in the bullpen.
Or trying to pick a guy off.
He shook his head. He looked normal just then, not like the guy behind the desk undressing me with his eyes. I'm sorry I was such a bitch just now.
I'm used to it.
No, you're not. Come on, people are nice to you all day. He shrugged.
You lied about why you were upset. I get to lie about how people treat me.
I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah,
he said, clearing his throat.
I have season tickets on the first baseline.
I felt my eyes light up a little, and getting so excited over something someone else had embarrassed me.
I could bring you sometime,
he said.
You haven't seen a Dodger game until you've seen it from the bleachers. $6 seats, yo. He laughed, and I laughed too. Then Debbie showed up at the end of the hall.
Monica, she called out, tapping her wrist. Shit, I cried out and ran back to my station, turning to give Jonathan a wave before rounding the corner. I put on a smile and made myself as intensely personable as I could.
I saw Jonathan at the head of the bar, talking to Sam and Debbie, laughing at some joke I couldn't hear. When I went to the station to pick up my tray, he looked at me, and I felt his sight. He was gorgeous, no doubt. I could write songs about that face, those cheekbones, those eyes, that dry scent.
I wished he'd go away. I tried not to look at him, but he and Sam were still talking at 1 a.m.
Debbie stood at the end of the service bar, counting receipts, when I came by with a ticket, and I couldn't take it anymore. I'm sorry I was talking to Mr. Drazen in the hall, I said. I used to work for him.
I know.
How often does he come around here? He and Sam have been close since they went to Stanford together, so once a week. Should I arrange for him to be here more often? My cheeks got hot. To Debbie, who read people like neon street signs, the blushing was visible even in the dim lights. I glanced at him across the bar. He was looking at Debbie and me. He lifted his rocks glass, a bunch of melting ice in the bottom. Sam had gone to take care of some late-night hotel business, and Jonathan was alone. Perfect, Debbie said to me. You will bring him his refill. She hailed the bartender, a buffed-out model who worked his body more than his mind. Robert, give Mr. Drazen's drink to Monica. Debbie, really, I said.
Why?
Asked Robert, pouring a glass of single malt from a shelf so high I would have needed a cherry pecker to reach it.
I'm not pretty enough.
You're plenty pretty, Debbie said. Now do it. She put her hand on my forearm and spoke quietly. You need more practice dealing with his social class. For you as a person. Getting used to it will only benefit you. Now go.
Being mothered was nice, I guess. My mother had been more or less absent since I went to high school, which was about when she and Dad moved to Castaic. I never felt abandoned, but I could have used a hand with the day-to-day bullshit.
Drazen watched me come around the bar with his scotch. I wondered if he knew that made me uncomfortable, or if he even gave it a thought. I wondered if the difference in our relative positions bothered him or turned him on. He was a bazillionaire and a customer. I was a waitress with 2 nickels making heat. This had to be a turn-on.
Thanks,
he said when I placed the napkin and drink on the bar, a job Robert could have done in half the time. You're welcome. We looked at each other for a second, or 10. I had nothing to add to the conversation, but his magnetic pull made words irrelevant. I was stepping away to leave when he said,
I meant it about seeing a game.
I meant it about the bleachers.
I like to get to know someone before they drag me out past center field.
He clinked his ice against the sides of his glass.
The company has to be pretty engaging that far from the plate.
I wanted to mention the stunning color of his eyes. I wanted to touch his hand as it rested on the edges of the bar. Instead, I said, your fellow fans keep you on your toes, especially if you wear red.
Can I see you after work?
The clattering noise in my chest must have been audible. It wasn't that I hadn't been asked out or the object of a proposition in the last year and a half. All of the men who wanted me were simply too easy to politely reject. If I had a brain in my head, I would reject Jonathan Drazen right out of hand, politely. Maybe, I said. Company's got to be pretty engaging at 2:30 in the morning. Sam showed up, and since I didn't want to be seen talking up my ex-boss, I walked away without confirming that he'd feel engaging at that ungodly hour. 7. I spent the next hour and a half talking myself out of meeting with Jonathan after work, if he even showed. He was going to be a distraction, I could tell. I couldn't be in the same room with him without feeling like I needed to touch him. I thought about Kevin. A fine specimen of a man, he'd had much the same effect on me as Jonathan Drazen, complete with fluttery stomach and tingling cheeks. I'd been with Darren over 6 years when he admitted to kissing Dana Fasano. We were in the process of either breaking up or getting married. I went to a party downtown with a friend whose name eluded me right then, and there he was. Kevin was talking to some girl in the corner, and when he glanced over her head, his eyes found mine like he was looking for them. I froze in place. He had brown eyes and thick black lashes, and when we saw each other, the distance between us became a plucked cello string, vibrating, making a beautiful sound. I didn't see him again for another half an hour, yet I had felt him circling me, tethered, even when we talked to different people. Finally, in the crowded kitchen, he was behind me, and I knew it because I could feel him before I even saw him reach over me to slide a beer from the sink.
Hi,
he said. Hi. He held the beer bottle toward me, his hands slick on the glass, cold water pooling in the crevice between his skin and the bottle.
That the opener over there?
I took the bottle from him, overreaching, as I'd done with Drazen, so I could touch his cool, wet hand. Then I put the bottle cap on the metal edge of the counter and pulled down swiftly. The cap bent and popped off, clinking to the floor. I held up the bottle for him. Here you go.
Thanks.
He considered the bottle, then me.
See that girl over there?
He pointed at a girl about my age, with short dark hair and striped leggings. Yeah?
In 20 seconds, she's gonna come over here and ask what I'm working on for my show. I don't want to tell her.
So don't. As if on cue, the girl saw Kevin and walked over. It was the first time I experienced him as a charmed person, and it would not be the last.
It would be better if she didn't ask. My paintings are secret before a show. If I tell her, she'll own them. Her soul will own them.
I can't explain it. The kitchen was crowded, slowing the striped leggings' progress and pushing us together, forcing us to whisper. I get it, I said. I would have gotten anything he said at that point. I would have claimed to understand quantum mechanics if he explained it to me. They aren't born yet, I continued. If she sees them while they're being made, she knows them as children, their insides.
My God, you get me.
I had no snappy reply. I wanted to get him. I wanted to get everything he said from now on. He touched my chin.
If I kiss you, she'll turn around and go away.
In retrospect, that was the lamest come-on imaginable from him. He'd done much better in the year following. But at the party, the word kiss breathed from his beautiful lips was all I needed.
I put my hand on his shoulder and he slipped one around my waist. Our lips met and I held back a groan of pleasure. I'd only ever been with Darren and I loved him. I would always love him. But kissing that man like that, with his taste of malt and chocolate, uncovered physical sensations I didn't know could come from a kiss. I felt every pore of his tongue, every turn of his lips. The world shut off and my identity became a glow of sexual desire. I went home barely able to walk from wanting him, and completed my breakup with Darren the next day. If desire was supposed to feel like that, I needed more of it. I felt awake, alive, not just sexy, but sexual. Thoughts of him infected me until I saw him again and we tumbled into bed, screwing like wild animals. When I finally walked away from him, weeping, I realized I'd let my sexuality control and manipulate me through him. He took my music and crushed it under the weight of his own talent. He ignored what I created, dismissing it, degenerating it, so that within 3 months I couldn't sing a word and any instrument I picked up became a bludgeon. I'd never felt so creatively dead and so sexually alive. When I got the strength to walk away from him, I vowed never again.
8. I snapped my locker closed, thinking about those Dodger seats on the first baseline. A corporation gets a skybox. A real fan gets tickets at field level. Luxuries be damned. I'd never seen a game from that angle. Debbie came into the locker room, buzzing with talk and flirting and locker doors banging, and handed out our tip envelopes. "A good night for everyone," she said, then got close to me. "Someone is waiting for you at the front exit. If you want to avoid him, go through the parking lot, but be nice. He's a friend of the hotel." "Can I ask you something?" "Quickly, I have to count out." "How many drinks did he have?" I asked as quietly as I could. Debbie smiled as if I'd asked the exact right question. 2. He nurses like a baby. I know you don't know me that well yet, but would going out the front be a mistake? Only if you take it too seriously. Thanks. Debbie walked off to hand out the rest of the envelopes. What she had said had been a relief, actually. It made the boundaries that much clearer. I could hang out, be close to him, and feel the buzz of sex between us, but I had to be careful about climbing into bed with him. Fair warning. 9. Jonathan stood in the lobby, talking to Sam, laughing like an old buddy. I wasn't going to approach him with my boss right there. Sam seemed like a fine guy for the 15 minutes we'd talked. With his white hair and slim build, he looked like a newscaster and had an all-business attitude. I just pushed through the revolving doors, figuring fate had lent a hand in deciding whether or not I'd see Drayson outside a rooftop bar. I was 3 steps into the hot night when I heard him call my name. "You stalking me?" I asked, slowing my steps to the parking lot.
Just wanted company to walk to my car.
We strolled down Flower Street, the long way, to the underground parking lot. Any normal person would have gone through the hotel.
"How do you know Sam?" I asked. "He introduced me to my ex-wife, which I'm trying not to hold against him."
"You're a good sport," I said. "Have you always been blue?" He tilted his head a few degrees.
"Dodger fan," I said.
"I would have taken you for more of an Angels guy."
Because I have money?"
"Kind of."
"I like a little grit,"
he said, that smile lighting up the night.
"Is that why you met me after work?"
I asked, turning toward the parking lot entrance.
"Kind of."
He let me go first into the underground passage, and I felt his eyes on me as I walked. It was not an uncomfortable feeling. When we got to the bottom of the ramp, we stopped. I parked in the employee level, and his car was in the valet section. I held up my hand to wave goodbye.
"It was nice to talk to you,"
I said.
"You too."
We faced each other, walking backward in opposite directions.
"See you around,"
I said.
"Okay."
He waved, tall and beautiful in the flat light and gray parking lot. Take care.
What do I have to say?
You have to say please, I said.
Please.
Where do you think you're taking me?
Come on. Text a friend and tell him who you're with, in case I'm a psycho killer.
10. The early hour guaranteed a traffic-free trip to the west side. I'd gotten into his Mercedes convertible thinking most killers don't drive with the top down where everyone could see, so I just let the wind whip my hair into a bird's nest. Jonathan drove with one hand, and as I watched his fingers move and slide on the bottom of the wheel, the hair on the back of it, the strong wrist, I imagined it on me. I grabbed the leather seat, trying to keep my mind on something, anything else, but the leather itself seemed to rub the backs of my thighs the wrong way. So, you pick up waitresses a lot? He smirked and glanced over to me. The wind was doing crazy shit to his hair as well, but it made him look sexy, and I was sure I looked like Medusa.
Only the very attractive ones.
I guess I should take that as a compliment.
You definitely should.
I'm not sleeping with you.
You mentioned that.
So, maybe the rumors were true, and he was a total womanizer. Well, I'd already told him sex was off the table, so he could womanize all he wanted. Didn't matter to me at all. I was driven by curiosity. Who was this guy? What was it like to be him? Not that it mattered, I told myself, because, again, I had no time for a heartbreak.
What's your instrument, Monica? You said you were a musician.
My voice, mostly, I said, but I play everything. I play piano, guitar, viola. I learned to play the theremin last year.
What is that?
Oh, it's beautiful. You actually don't touch it to play it. There's an electrical signal between two antennae, and you move your hands between them to create a sound. That's just the most haunting thing you ever heard.
You play it without touching it?
Yeah, you just move your hands inside it, like a dance.
This I have to see.
When he tipped his head toward me, I thought, oh, no. He wants me to play it for him. Never gonna happen. For some reason, the idea of this guy seeing me sing or play made me feel vulnerable, and I wasn't in for that at all. You can watch people play it on YouTube.
True, but I want to watch you do it.
I didn't know where we were going, so I didn't know how much of a drive we were in for. I wanted to get off the subject of me before I told him something that gave him a hold over me. I had to remember he was my new boss's friend, and I really liked working at the stock. What do you do besides own hotels and pick up very attractive waitresses?
I own lots of things, and they all need attention.
He pulled the car to the side of the road. We were on the twistiest part of Mulholland, the part that looked like a desolate park instead of the most expensive real estate in Los Angeles County. A short guardrail stood between the car and a nearly sheer drop down to the valley and its twinkling Saturday night lights.
Let's go take a look,
he said, pulling the emergency brake. I got out, thankful for the opportunity to uncross my legs, and slammed the door behind me. I walked toward the edge overlooking the city. My heels kept hitting little rocky ditches, but I played it off. They were comfortable, but they weren't hiking boots. I stood close to the guardrail, leaning against it with my knees. I felt him behind me, closing his door and jingling his keys. I'd been to places like that before. There were thousands of them all over the city, which was surrounded by hills and mountains. Way back when, before I'd even kissed Darren, I'd been up to a similar place to squirm around the back of Peter Dunbar's Nissan. And after the prom, I'd come up to drink too much and make love to Darren behind a tree. Do you live up here? I asked.
I live in Griffith Park.
He stepped behind me.
Those bright lights, those are Universal City. To the right, that black part is the Hollywood Reservoir.
I could feel his breath on the back of my neck.
Toluca Lake is to the left.
He put his hands on my neck, where every nerve ending in my body was now located, following his touch as he stroked me, like the little magnet shavings under plastic I'd played with as a kid. When the pen moved, the shavings moved,
and I arched my neck to feel more of him.
"The rest,"
he said,
"is hell on earth. Not recommended."
He kissed me at the base of my neck. His lips were full and soft. His tongue traced a line across my shoulder. I gasped. I had not a single word to say, even when I felt his erection against my back and his hands moved across my stomach, feeling me through my clothes. God, I hadn't been touched like that in so long. When did I decide men were too much trouble? 1.5 years since I shed Kevin like a too-warm coat? I couldn't even say. Drazen's lips were more than lips. They were the physical memory of myself before I shut out sex to pursue music. I twisted, my lips searching for his, my mouth open for him as his was for me. We met there, tongues twisting together. His chest to my back, his hands moving up my shirt, teasing my nipples. I moaned and turned to face him. He pushed me against the car. The hardness between his legs felt enormous on my thigh. He moved his hand down and pushed my legs open, gripping tight enough to press my jeans against my skin. He looked down at me, and the intensity of the lust in his eyes was nearly intimidating. But I was way past sense, miles. The thought of saying, "No, stop, I need sleep so I'm fresh for rehearsals tomorrow," didn't even occur to me. He pushed his hips between my legs and kissed me again. I was hungry for him. A white, hot ball of heat grew beneath my hips. We kept kissing and grinding, hands everywhere. I pinched his nipple through his shirt and he gasped, biting my neck. I hated my clothes. I hated every layer of fabric between myself and his cock. I wanted to feel skin sweating above mine, his dick rigid and hot, his hands at my breasts. I wanted those hard, dry thrusts to be real slick, sliding inside me. The siren blast split my ears. I almost choked on my own spit. Jonathan looked over at the police car, and the tension in his neck was the last thing I saw before the light got too bright to see anything. I lowered my legs, and when he got off me, he held his hand out to help me off the hood.
"Good morning,"
came a male voice from behind the driver's side light. The passenger door opened, and a female cop got out. "Good morning," Jonathan and I answered like two kids greeting their third-grade teacher. He wove his fingers in mine. The female cop shone her flashlight in my face. I flinched. "You okay, miss?" "Yeah." "Can you step away from the gentleman, please? Come toward me." I did, hands out so she knew I wasn't reaching for anything. The cop pulled me out of earshot. "Do you know this guy?" she asked, shining a little light into my pupils to see if I was on anything stronger than pheromones. "Yes."
"Are you here of your own free will?"
"Yes."
"That was pretty hot."
She snapped her little light down. "Next time, get a room, okay?" 11. Things cooled on the way home. I kept my legs crossed, and his hand stayed on the gear shifter. When I told Jonathan the lady cop said we should get a room, he laughed.
"If only she knew who she was talking about,"
he said. After a few seconds, he stopped at a light and turned to me.
"So, what's up with you saying you're not sleeping with me, then pushing up against my dick on the hood of my car?"
I was a little annoyed with the question because he brought me there and he started kissing my neck. But I also couldn't pretend I wasn't just as responsible for the raw heat of the scene. I had to pause and think. The light changed, and when he turned his head back to the road, I felt like I could talk. "I have things I'm doing. I can't be up all night fucking because my voice gets messed up. I can't think about a man, any man, nothing personal, when I should be writing songs. Carving out enough nights for songwriting between gigs and working is hard enough without making time for a boyfriend, so, I had to give up something in life, and it's men." He nodded and thought about it. He rubbed his chin, which had a little bit of stubble. My neck remembered it very fondly.
"I get it."
"So, I'm sorry I led you on. That was careless." His laugh was loud and inappropriate, considering what I'd just said, but he didn't seem embarrassed. "What's so funny?" I asked.
"You're taking all my best lines." "Didn't mean to steal your thunder." "No problem. I enjoyed hearing it."
I leaned back and watched the scenery change from the twisted forestation of Mulholland to the expanse of the 101. How did I end up in this car at 4 a.m. with a known womanizer? Yes, he was gorgeous and warm and knew all the right places and ways to touch me, but really, how stupid would I be? How many women had fallen for this crap, and I was going to be another one in line? The wind made it hard to talk until he pulled off downtown.
"What's with you and sleeping around?" I asked.
"What do you mean?"
"All the women. You have a reputation."
"Do I?"
He smirked, not looking at me as he drove.
"And that didn't chase you away?" "I trust myself. I trust my instincts and my resolve. You just make me curious, is all." He shrugged.
"What do you think your reputation is?"
"I don't have one."
"Of course you do. Everyone does. When people talk about Monica, what do they say, besides that she's beautiful?"
I let the compliment slide. Coming from someone who had almost made his way into my pants, it didn't mean much. "I guess they say I'm ambitious. I hope they say I'm talented. My friend Darren would say I'm cold."
"Did he try to get you into bed, too?"
"Shut up." He glanced at me, and we smiled at each other. I was with him for 6.5 years, so it's not like he had to try for a long time.
"Was it a hard breakup?"
He stopped at a light and turned his gaze to me, ready to offer me sympathy or words of wisdom. No, it was the easiest thing we ever did. I couldn't discern what he was thinking from the way he looked at me, but he got serious, draining his tone of all flirtation.
"Easy for you?"
"Both. It was dying for a long time." He looked out his window, rubbing his lips with 2 fingertips. "You want to say something you're not saying," I said. "I don't want to be your girlfriend, so being honest isn't going to come back and bite you in the ass." The stock and my car were a block away. He pulled up to the curb. He put the Mercedes in park, but didn't turn the key.
"You really want to know?"
"Yeah."
"Why?"
"Because you make me curious." He smirked.
"My wife and I were married that long. It wasn't easy."
He rubbed the steering wheel, and I realized he regretted answering even the first part of the question. It was too late for me to give up on him now, so I waited until he said,
"She left and took everything with her."
"I don't understand. Are you broke?" He put the car into drive and turned to me.
"She didn't take a dime. She took everything that mattered."
I felt sorry, and then I felt stupid for feeling any kind of sympathy. I wanted to hold his hand and tell him he'd get over it someday, but nothing could have been less appropriate. "I'm kind of hungry," I said. "There's this food truck thing on 1st and Olive in a parking lot. You can come if you want."
"It's 4 a.m.
"Don't come. Your call."
"You're a tough customer. Anyone ever tell you that?"
I shrugged. I really was hungry, and nothing sounded better than a little koji kimchi right then. 12. Jonathan was right in mentioning the time. 4 a.m. was pretty late, as evidenced by the fact that he found a place for the car half a block away. We walked into the lot, against the traffic of 20 and 30-something partiers as they filtered out, 1/3 more sober than they had been when they got there, carrying food folded in wax paper or swishing around eco-friendly containers. The lot was smallish, being in the middle of downtown and not in front of a Costco. The only parked vehicles lined the chain-link fence, brightly painted trucks spewing luscious smells from all over the globe. My koji truck was there, as well as a gourmet popcorn truck, artisanal grilled cheese, lobster poppers, ice cream, sushi, and Mongolian barbecue. The night's litter dotted the asphalt, hard white from the brash floodlights brought by the truck owners. The truck stops were informal and gathered by tweet and rumor. Each truck brought their own tables and chairs, garbage pail and lights. The customers came between midnight and whenever. I scanned the lot for someone I knew, hoping I'd find someone to say hello to on one hand, and wishing Jonathan and I could stay alone on the other. "My Koji truck is over there," I said.
"I'm going to Korea next week. The last thing I need is to fill up on Koji. Have you had Tipo's tacos?"
"Tacos? Really?" "Come on." He took my hand and pulled me over to the taco truck.
"You're not a vegetarian or anything?"
"No."
"Hola,"
he said to the guy in the window, who looked to be about my age or younger, with a wide smile and little mustache.
"¿Qué tal?"
he continued. That was about the extent of my Spanish, but not Jonathan's. He started rattling off stuff, asking questions, and if the laughter between him and the guy with the little mustache was any indication, joking fluidly. If I'd closed my eyes, I'd have thought he was a different person. "You speak Spanish?" I asked.
"I live in Los Angeles,"
Jonathan replied, as if his answer was the most obvious in the world.
"You don't speak it?"
Little Mustache asked me. "No." He said something to Jonathan, and there was more conversation, which made me feel left out. They were obviously talking about me.
"He wants to know if you're as smart as you are beautiful,"
Jonathan said. "What did you tell him?"
"Prospects are good, but I need time to get to know you better."
"Anywhere in that conversation did you order me a pastor?"
"Just one?"
"Yes, just one."
"They're small."
He made a circle with his hands, smiling like an old grandma talking to her granddaughter about being too damn skinny. I pinched his side, and there wasn't much to grab. It was hard and tight. "One," I said, trying to forget that I'd touched him. We sat at a long table. A few trucks were breaking down for the night. There was a feeling of quiet and finality, the feeling he and I had outlasted the late-nighters and deep partiers. I finished my taco in 3 bites and turned around, putting my back to the table and stretching my legs. He took a swig of his water and touched my bicep with his thumb.
"No tattoos?"
"No. Why?"
"Mid-20s, musician, lives in Echo Park. You need tattoos and piercings to get into that club."
I shook my head. I went a few times, but couldn't commit to anything. My best friend Gabby has a few. I went with her once, and I couldn't decide what to get, and anyway, it would have been awkward.
"Why?"
He was working on his last taco, so I guess I felt like I should do the talking until he finished. She was getting something important. On the inside of her wrist, she got the words "never again" on the scars she made when she cut herself. I couldn't diminish it by getting some stupid thing on me. He ate his last bite and balled up his napkin.
"What happened that made her try to commit suicide?"
"We have no idea. She doesn't even know. Just life." I wanted to tell him I'd found her and been with her in the hospital and that I took care of her. But I thought I'd gotten heavy enough. "I have a piercing, though," I said. "Want to see?"
"I can see your ears from here."
I lifted my shirt to show him my navel ring with its little fake diamond. Yes, it hurt.
Lovely."
He touched it, then spread his fingers over my stomach. His pinky grazed the top of my waistband, and I took in a deep gasp. He put a little pressure toward him on my waist, and I followed it, kissing him deeply. His stubble scratched my lips, and his tongue tasted of the water he'd just drunk. I put my hands on his cheeks, weaving my fingers in his hair. It was sweet and doomed and pointless, but it was late, and he was handsome and funny. I may not have been interested in having a boyfriend, but I wasn't made of stone. When Little Mustache had to break down the table, we had to admit it was time to go. The sky had gone from navy to cyan, and the air warmed with the appearance of the first arc of the sun. We got to his car before he had to feed the meter. We didn't say anything as he pulled into the parking lot at the stock and went down 2 stories to my lonely Honda, sitting in the employee section. I opened the door with a clack that echoed in the empty underground lot.
"Thanks,"
he said.
"I'll probably see you at the hotel sometime."
"We can pretend this never happened."
"Up to you."
He touched my cheek with his fingertips, and I felt like an electrical cable to my nervous system went live.
"I wouldn't mind finishing the job."
"Let's not promise each other anything."
"All right. No promises,"
he said. No lies, I replied.
See you around.
We parted without a goodbye kiss. 13. Gabby and I lived in the house I grew up in, which was on the second steepest hill in Los Angeles. When my parents moved, they let me live in the house for rent that equaled the property taxes plus utilities. I was sure I'd never need to move. I had 2 bedrooms and a little yard. The house had been a worthless piece of crap in a bad neighborhood when they bought it in the 1980s. Now it had a cardiologist to the west of it and a converted Montessori school that cost $1,800 a month to the east. The night Jonathan Drazen took me up to Mulholland Drive, I returned to find Darren sleeping on my couch. We had agreed not to leave Gabby alone until we knew she was okay, and she'd gotten no better after a week on her meds. The first blue light of morning came through the drapes, so I could see well enough to step around the pizza box he'd left on the floor and get into the bathroom.